throughout the course of the 7-year war in Yemen, children have paid the price. Over 10,000 children have been killed since the start of the conflict in 2014. But that toll hides an even more sinister number. An annual report submitted to the United Nations this week contends that over 2,000 children were sent to fight and die in Yemen in the past 2 years. All were between 10 to 17 years old. The report by a panel of experts details the process by which Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels recruited and trained children, using summer camps and a mosque as the grounds for them to spread their ideology. The children were, quote, instructed to shout the Houthi slogan, "Death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews, and victory to Islam." It added that at one of the camps, children as young as 7 were taught how to clean weapons and evade rockets. The 300-page report details violations of international humanitarian and human rights law, which the panel said in Yemen had become, quote, the norm rather than the exception. It also detailed evidence of violations to the UN embargo, which prohibits arms transfers to the Iranian-backed Houthis and paramilitary forces loyal to them. The United States and Saudi Arabia, both supporters of the Yemeni government, have accused Iran of supplying weapons to the Houthis. In the past few weeks, more than 100 civilians have been killed as fighting intensifies, with frequent airstrikes targeting what the Saudi-led coalition says are Houthi military targets. The Houthis have stepped up missile and drone attacks in the United Arab Emirates, as well as cross-border launches on Saudi Arabia.
Now we have become afraid day and night. You don't know when the strikes will happen. The homes of citizens are now military targets. You fear that you will take your children to school or to the hospital or something like that, and you will get hit. You're not safe even in the middle of your home.
Tens of thousands have been killed in the regional proxy war pitting Yemen's internationally recognized government against the Iranian-backed Houthis, displacing millions and creating what the UN has labeled the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Millions suffer from food and medical care shortages that for years have been pushing the country to the brink of famine.
And the journalist behind that report, Mary McAuliffe, is here with me in the studio. Good to see you, Mary. And that UN report also states, doesn't it, that the Houthis continue to violate arms embargoes. How exactly are they managing to do that?
Right, Laura. So we're seeing the main reasons what they're saying, at least this UN report is saying, that they're using this complex system of global intermediaries really all around the world. So from Europe to the Middle East, Africa, that they have their friends who are helping the Houthis get around this UN arms embargo. But it did also specifically pinpoint Oman to say that many of the weapons who are coming in, so most of what they're actually getting around the arms embargo is components to make weapons. So engines, different materials that they actually put together. And then once they're inside of Yemen, they're actually put together by the Houthi forces, but they do believe that most of these are coming via land through Oman. So Oman is the only country in the region, and it does have a border with Yemen. It's the only country that still has ties with the Houthi rebel movement. So the UN report now is saying, pinpointing the finger at them to saying that they are the key figure in getting these weapons and the components into Yemen.
And does this then provide concrete proof that Iran is in fact backing the Houthis? We know Saudi Arabia and Israel and others have been saying that for a long time now.
Right, so it doesn't say concretely whether or not it is Iran. It does sort of allude to it in many cases, but it does not confirm or deny any of the allegations. So it's mostly the U.S. has been coming out forcefully against it. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia have been the main ones who are accusing Iran of putting weapons in and supplying weapons to the Houthi movement. So the report doesn't specifically touch on them, but it does come just a month after there was a report earlier at the beginning of January from the Wall Street Journal that did say that the UN had found evidence that Iran was leaking these weapons, directly giving that weapons to the Yemen Houthis. So it's not really clear exactly what the report doesn't touch on, doesn't say if this report is correct, different, if it's maybe a completely different issue. But we have seen many different sources in the past few months really pinpointing Iran to say this, but we are not hearing the UN definitively say that.
And just going briefly back to your report, it is absolutely shocking, isn't it, to see how many children are being recruited and dying on the battlefield in Yemen in this terrible conflict, which is now in its 8th year almost.
Almost, exactly. So it's seen, for years we have seen reports about these children fighters that have been mobilized by the Houthi fighters in this conflict, and really ages from 10 to 17 years old. So it's really heartbreaking to think of a 10-year-old loading a rocket and setting these off. But this is what we are hearing, and it is sort of giving further solid proof. It's the first time the UN has really come with such an in-depth report about it. It has also spoken out about this issue and the rights violations against children in Yemen and all these war-torn conflicts. It is the children are coming out to be one of the main victims, but really, truly horrible stories hearing about these young kids who are getting roped up into this and sort of brainwashed, as the report sort of alludes to, is that they're taught into these camps and they're given the ideology of the Houthi rebels and then sent out to the battlefield. And unfortunately, in the past 2 years, over 2,000 of them have been killed.